don't know what it is about this year in particular, especially in terms of electoral politics. But Detroit, it seems that one particular political party, the Republican Party, has fielded a host of candidates who are literally one flew over the cuckoo's nest in terms of insanity. Let me explain. Does anyone think that it's normal or wise to show up to your place of employment dressed in full Confederate regalia? Does anyone think that that's a normal function of how you would show up to your employer? Well, in Pennsylvania, the Republican Party thinks that it's okay because they nominated a dude who did that by the name of Doug Mastriani. He's running for governor. Oh, and by the way, he was also present on January 6th, storming the nation's Capitol building. So you're telling me someone who wanted to violently overthrow elected officials is now, well, running himself to become an elected official? Cuckoo, cuckoo. And then you get some other crazy shit too. Out in Arizona, the Republican nominee, Kari Lake, she doesn't even think her opponent, who's running as a Democrat, should be allowed to run. I kid you not, she said that her opponent should be in prison for stealing the state of Arizona. Now, they've done so many recounts in Arizona, I've lost track. You've had the cyber ninja clowns coming there. You've had the state do recounts. And each and every recount has declared that President Biden won the state of Arizona. However, in Kari Lake's imaginary world, somehow the lunatic from Mar-a-Lago won. But there hasn't been any result to prove that. But nonetheless, she wants her opponent jailed in prison for stealing the state of Arizona. Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Then you got Senator Ron Johnson in Wisconsin. He found a magic cure for coronavirus that no other scientist could find. And it was something so common that we all could have run to Fred Meyer or Jewel Osco, Costco, Bartels. Wouldn't you know, it was Listerine mouthwash all the time. You don't have to take my word for it. Go and look it up. He said that if you use Listerine mouthwash, it kills coronavirus. This was while they were also peddling hydroxychloroquine and other magical, non-existent cures for coronavirus. He also wants to do away with Social Security and Medicare. It's too much money that we're giving the senior citizens on fixed income, according to Ron Johnson. You've got J.D. Vance running for Senate in Ohio. He doesn't believe that women should be allowed to get out of marriages even when they're in domestic violence and abusive relationships. Shouldn't be given the option to have a divorce. It's been detrimental, he said, to our society, especially to our children, allowing women to divorce. You look it up, this is what he said. I'm not making this shit up. And now Detroit. After multiple candidates could not meet the bare minimum in terms of signature requirements to even run for governor, they finally settled on someone to challenge the current Democrat governor in Michigan, Governor Gretchen Whitmer. They finally settled on someone. And boy, they found a doozy. Her name is Tudor Dixon. And she's another one flew over the cuckoo's nest individual, if I ever saw or heard one. Now, recently, she made some comments at 2 campaign stops. You would have thought at the first campaign stop, when she made the comment, that when you speak it out loud, you're like, maybe we should take this out of there. I don't think it's appropriate, so to speak. What am I referring to? So, Tudor Dixon, the Republican candidate for governor in Michigan, thought it was appropriate to joke about the 2020 plot to kidnap and unalive the current governor of Michigan. On 2 separate occasions, she joked and made light of kidnapping. Now, this woman has to be out of her mind. That's the only explanation I can reasonably come up with. Because I went and looked at the statistics. Every year in this country, 290,000 women and girls are abducted. We hear from time to time stories, like recently what happened in Memphis, where Miss Fletcher, who was going on her regular jog, she jogs every day. The woman is an avid runner. And somebody kidnapped her, violently assaulted her, and then unalived her. Thank goodness they found the individual. And hopefully he'll be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. But what I'm trying to get at is kidnapping of women and girls in this country is not something that's minuscule or rarely occurs. We had Gabby Petito, and so many other stories happened in these last 2 years. Domestic violence, I've spoken about this numerous times. Femicide and domestic violence is through the roof everywhere, but especially in this country. In neighboring states like Missouri, you look at St. Louis, the femicide rate is off the chart. I've made so many videos saying that this has got to end, this has got to stop. And for another woman to think it's appropriate to joke about kidnapping, assaulting, and unaliving another woman, I said, is this woman out of her mind? She's got to be. And before you say, oh well, lighten up, take a joke, you ought to read the charging documents that the FBI and the federal government, the DOJ, did concerning those individuals who were plotting to do that to Governor Whitmer. It was very, very detailed, specific, credible, and serious, to the point where 2 of the individuals have been found guilty of the charges and await sentencing. Now, I'm not going to go too much into the specifics of it, but there were a group of well-trained individuals, some with extensive military experience and expertise. And these individuals weren't just talking about harming the governor. Maybe Tudor Dixon needs to read the charging documents, because she's making this about Governor Whitmer when this is about Michiganders too. There was an individual, a part of that group, who turned state's evidence against the rest of them because he said he wanted out. It became too extreme. They were plotting to put explosives on underpass of bridges, to blow up bridges, harming scores of Michiganders who travel over bridges every day in the state. They were plotting to shoot and unalive law enforcement officers. They plotted to kidnap the governor at her summer home, take her out to a secluded area where they had practice, live stream, assaulting her. And I'm not even going to describe the types of assaults they wanted to do to her. The woman is married. She has a family. But these men were so sick, and it was so grotesque. I'm not even going to read it. Maybe Tudor Dixon should read the charging documents. And then they wanted to live stream unaliving her for the whole nation to see. Now, they said they were frustrated about the COVID-19 restrictions that the governor had put in place. This was at the onset of the pandemic. So what does that have to do with law enforcement? What does that have to do with Michiganders who were traveling over the bridges they were planning to detonate with explosive devices? So somebody ought to ask Tudor Dixon, is that also a laughing matter? The scores and scores of Michiganders were planning to be executed by these deranged lunatics. This is the quality of candidates that the Republican Party is running this year. I mean, it's in the toilet. And they have nothing to run on. Instead of Tudor Dixon talking about Leader McCarthy 24 hours prior to her speaking, giving his, commitment to America agenda, that really wasn't an agenda. They had nothing in there. Maybe that's why she's cracking jokes about kidnapping of women, because they have absolutely nothing to run on. You know, it's amazing. I was expecting the entire Democrat Party to criticize the commitment to bamboozle America. But in less than 24 hours, get this, you've had 3 sitting congressional members of the Republican Party criticize this. Liz Cheney said it's not a plan. Adam Kinzinger said it's not a plan. And now Dan Crenshaw has said it's not a plan. 3 current members of the Republican Congressional Caucus and Party have said that shit that McCarthy came and spoke about in Pennsylvania, it's not a plan. And I agree with them. There were no details. He just said we want Americans to have freedom. Except for women, who Arizona just the other day stripped of their basic fundamental reproductive care rights. South Carolina tried to do it. Arizona succeeded. Look, I think the reason Tudor Dixon is telling disgusting and grotesque jokes about kidnapping of women and girls in our society is because she saw the Detroit Free Press poll, where she's floundering and sinking like a rock. The Detroit Free Press poll, and remember, we've still got a long way to go before Election Day, and polls are just that, a snapshot in time. But the Detroit Free Press has Tudor Dixon trailing Governor Whitmer by 16 percentage points. No, I didn't misspeak. She's currently trailing the governor by 16 percentage points, according to the Detroit Free Press poll. And I think there's a reason for that. One, Tudor Dixon is an extremist quackpot. But two, and most importantly, Michiganders really like their current governor. You know, Governor Whitmer, it's amazing. People in Detroit, you know, it's really hard to get people in Detroit to like you. It really is. They've been abused and neglected for so long in the state of Michigan by politicians. And Governor Whitmer, they really like her. Some folks were on the street and they saw a sign in a storefront window, and it was for the governor, and they started chuckling. I thought to myself, well, what's funny? And they were like, well, she's a real one. She's the G. And that's why these signs are around here in this area. Bear in mind, this is an area where people don't really like politicians or fuck with politics, but they support their current governor. And that's because I think that, and this is no small statement on my part, Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan is probably the best governor in America. If not the best, she's number 2 or number 3. The amount of concern and real support, tangible support the constituents get and receive from the governor is just off the chart. Now, she ran originally on fixing the damn potholes. This was before COVID. And not only during COVID did all the potholes get fixed, she also minimized severe disease and death due to the virus in her state. It was one of the best managed states in the country in terms of managing the spread of coronavirus. People know that in Michigan, and they respect her choices. However difficult they were, they respect her. You know, in terms of legislation, there's not too many politicians I can say this about. But with Governor Whitmer, every piece of legislative policy She literally says and thinks, how is this going to affect the working mom, the working Michigander mom, who's a mother of 3 or 4, working 2 jobs, struggling to make ends meet? Most politicians speak the rhetoric. Governor Whitmer lives the rhetoric. She literally has Michigander moms on speed dial, and she explains, look, this is what this piece of legislation is going to do. This is how it's going to help you out. Women in Michigan feel heard, validated, and seen by this governor like no other governor in Michigan history. This is the word on the street. People who have been down and out on their luck, they say they reach out. And they say they're never disappointed. They might not always get the things that they need at that moment. But they say that Big G has got them. And it gets done eventually. However long, however tedious, it gets done. And there's also something else very rare that Michigan has. In all of the major elected governmental positions in the state, you have strong woman-led leadership. The Attorney General, Dana Nessel, she has made it her job and mission to defend every Michigander their right to have a quality of life just like their neighbor. I can't think of a better advocate and ally in terms of same-sex individuals than Dana Nessel. Nobody has ever advocated for everyone in Michigan like she's done as Attorney General. Then you have Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson. Now let me tell you how Jocelyn defended Michiganders, all Michiganders. When you had the lunatic from Mar-a-Lago alleged that Michigan was stolen without any proof, and then Rudy Giuliani helicoptered into the state of Michigan and talked with state senators and tried to get votes in Detroit tossed, Jocelyn said, not happening on my watch. She sued. She took things to the DOJ. And she stopped Rudy Giuliani's plot to toss thousands and thousands of mostly black voters' votes. We're talking about a level of disenfranchisement that we have never, ever seen, the scale of it and scope. They literally wanted to come into Michigan and just not count the votes of people who live in Detroit. We'll count the votes of everyone who lives outside of Detroit, but we'll avoid counting the votes of Detroit. This was Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump's plan. And Jocelyn Benson picked up the biggest bucket of cold water and poured it all over that shit. Literally, I think if you didn't have Governor Whitmer, if you didn't have Dana Nessel, and if you didn't have Jocelyn Benson, the state of Michigan, and this is not hyperbole, folks, the state of Michigan would have been stolen from Michiganders. They would have given the state, even knowing that Donald Trump lost, they would have given the state to him. All 3 those elected officials deserve to be re-elected overwhelmingly this year. All three are up for re-election. And I think all three will get re-elected overwhelmingly. You know, I remember in the 90s, the Joe Louis Arena, the Red Wings, Detroit Red Wings, they were champions in the late 90s. 97, they win the Stanley Cup. 98, they win the Stanley Cup. 99, they get to the Stanley Cup Finals. And then in 2000, they win it again. But you have to ask yourself, why did they keep winning so much? Because they had talent. And they invested and held on to their talent. You had Steve Yzerman, the captain. I think one of the greatest captains of any hockey team in history. And I know some of you will say Mario Lemieux, Mark Gretzky, but Yzerman is up there. And you had Sergei Fedorov and Pavel Datsyuk and Nicholas Lindstrom, Thomas Holmstrom. It was a team effort. That is what creates success. You know, they say often there's no I in team. Teamwork makes the dream work. Michigan, I grew up hearing the phrase all the time, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. Michigan is certainly not broken. It's one of the best managed states in the country. It has the best and most qualified, effective leadership teams in the country. And it's producing victory after victory after victory for Michiganders. Michiganders used to complain all the time about the roads, the potholes. Nobody complains about the potholes anymore. In Michigan, it was a struggle sometimes in the Midwest to find employment. Not anymore. It's booming. If you're talking about the jobs of the future, electric charging stations, electric vehicles, Michigan is at the forefront of that innovation. Your governor works tirelessly to keep Michigan Motown, to keep it the manufacturing hub of America. Nobody works more than Governor Whitmer to do this. She's your captain, and you really have a stellar team. Joshua Benson single-handedly defended democracy when it was at stake. And that's why you see the extreme MAGA element really target her. I mean, viciously targeting this woman. Because she didn't let Black and Latino voters have their votes tossed out. You remember they came down to Detroit when they were counting the ballots. They were pounding on the windows, screaming, "Let us in, let us in." It was an angry mob sent there by the lunatic from Mar-a-Lago who was telling everyone the election in Michigan was stolen. He went on Lou Dobbs. Lou Dobbs was peddling this every night, that there was fraud in Michigan, especially in Detroit. Now, I wonder why they would say such a thing like that, and then say it has nothing to do with race. Well, If 90+% of the people who live in Detroit are black, how can you say it has nothing to do with race when you want to toss their votes but only count the people who don't live in Detroit, who, oh, by the way, don't happen to be black? I didn't really understand that. Somebody's going to have to explain that one to me. And then you got Dana, who's the Attorney General, who didn't have to do what she did to defend the rights of same-sex individuals. She could have said, oh, they're a small constituency in my state. They're most likely going to vote for me anyway. She didn't have to stick her neck out to make sure that every Michigander is afforded the rights of liberty and justice under the law. But she did it anyway. You have an impeccable and stellar team at the helm. Make sure they remain there. The alternative is a nightmare. I know that Detroit will come through. But you gotta show up and show out like never before. You've gotta defend Detroit. You've gotta defend Michigan. And you've gotta defend democracy. Look, if somebody parachutes into your place who doesn't know you and says all of these salacious things about you, it's time to stand up and defend yourself. And that's what the MAGA crowd did. They came into a place they did not know anything about and said the most vicious, cruel, and unspeakable things about people in Detroit. Detroit residents are not going to go for that. They're just not. That's the word on the street. They said, we're not going for this shit. We know who we are. We don't need some loser coming in telling us what to do. That's how they described Rudy Giuliani, a real loser. So I have no doubt in my mind that Detroit will be defended. And I have no doubt in my mind that all three of your leaders will be reelected. Look, I say this all the time. The Democrat Party is diverse. You've got Governor Whitmer in the same state as Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. Everybody's not going to agree with everybody on every issue, and that's fine. So long as things get done for Michiganders, and things get done regardless of philosophical disagreements in the Democrat Party in Michigan, things get done. You saw things didn't always get done when you had Republican leadership. You had dirty drinking water in Flint. You had potholes everywhere. You had corruption scandals. None of that with Governor Whitmer. None of it. Don't take that for granted, is all I'm trying to stress to people. You got a really good thing going in Michigan. Keep it rolling.